Hi everybody, welcome to this Wall Street News. Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller said on Friday, quote, "If inflation comes down to target, we can actually bring rates down. I think we're in the position that it could do this as early as July." According to the S&P Global, the preliminary U.S. Composite Purchasing Managers Index fell slightly from 53 in May to 52.8 in June. The National Association of Realtors reported Monday that existing home sales increased 0.8% in May from the previous month. Federal Reserve Governor Bowman said on Monday, quote, "Should inflation pressures remain contained, I will support lowering the policy rate as soon as our next meeting." 10-year Treasury yield falls to 4.34% after Bowman's remarks. For the U.S. stocks, S&P 500 rose 0.96% and the Nasdaq Composite gained 0.94% after the excellent news from a U.S. airbase in Qatar. Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller had an interview with CNBC on last Friday and said, quote, "Right now, the data in the last few months has been showing that trend inflation is looking pretty good, even on a 12-month basis. If inflation comes down to target, we can actually bring rates down. I think we're in the position that it could do this as early as July." According to the S&P Global, the preliminary U.S. Composite Purchasing Managers Index fell slightly from 53 in May to 52.8 in June. The S&P Global said, quote, "The ongoing expansion reflected a further rise in new orders, though the rise in orders dipped slightly in June to remain well below the strong gains seen at the turn of the year." In addition, S&P Global Flash U.S. Services PMI also decreased from 53.7 in May to 53.1 in June. The S&P Global said, quote, "Although service sector output growth cooled slightly, it remained solid." The S&P Global Flash U.S. Manufacturing PMI remained unchanged at 52 in June. The S&P Global said, quote, "Factory production rose for the first time in 4 months in June, and new orders growth slipped only marginally from May's 3-month high." The National Association of Realtors reported Monday that existing home sales increased 0.8% in May to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 4.03 million, down 0.7% from the previous year. The National Association of Realtors chief economist Lawrence Yun said, quote, "The relatively subdued sales are largely due to persistently high mortgage rates." In addition, the median existing home price increased from $414,000 in April to $422,800 in May, up 1.3% year-over-year. Federal Reserve Governor Bowman delivered a speech in Prague on Monday, quote, "Should inflation pressures remain contained, I would support lowering the policy rate as soon as our next meeting in order to bring it closer to its neutral setting and to sustain a healthy labor market." 10-year Treasury yield fell on Monday after Bowman's speech. U.S. crude oil falls to $66.53 after the excellent news from a U.S. airbase in Qatar. U.S. stocks rallied on Monday after the excellent news from a U.S. airbase in Qatar. S&P 500 rose 0.96% and the Dow Jones Industrial Average added 0.89%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq gained 0.94%. Okay, this is the end of today's news. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.